Hi everyone, welcome. It is Wednesday, it's 4:30-ish p.m. Central Time, and it's time for the ViaMonstra Academy office hours. As you can see, we have a few distinguished guests joining us today, and with that being said, let's get this show going. All right, then, welcome back and welcome Andrew, and a special welcome to Adam and Steve joining us from a little bit all over the planet. So to our special guests, Adam, would you like to mention a little bit about yourself before we get going?
Sure. I'm Adam Gross. I'm a endpoint, whatever the thing is, an MVP somewhere in the Microsoft stack. Of course, my
Enterprise Mobility, I believe.
That's the one. Enterprise Mobility. In my day job, I'm a manager over all the endpoint end user computing stuff at a chemical company, and just happy to be on and hanging out today.
Right,
yeah, and I'm Steve. So I do stuff with Microsoft around Windows Autopatch and MMD, and I was previously an Enterprise Mobility MVP.
That's one of the, I guess, the only disadvantage joining Microsoft is that they don't allow you to be MVP at the same time. It's kind of like, dang it. You get the other perks, but you, yeah, all right. Yeah, I stumbled across you guys years and years ago, but about 4 or 5 years ago, you guys set out to establish what is probably the largest training platform for Intune on YouTube. Can you tell us a little bit more about how it's been and, well, how it's going?
We accidentally stumbled into that.
Yeah,
really. It started out as just a conversation at the MMS conference one year. Steve and I said, "Hey, we should maybe do a podcast on Intune," and I thought that meant let's record a video, and we got on, and he had weeks worth of content scheduled out for us to go through. And from then on, I mean, for the first couple of years, it was every Friday night was date night with Steve, and we'd get on and just hammer through Intune content. And the truth behind this is, when we started it, I very much was brand new to Intune, had not used it, had not done anything with it. And so really, anyone who's come along with us in the channel, you've come along the same journey as I have. You learned it. I learned it just as we were teaching everybody. And so most of my reactions, most of the stuff there was absolutely genuine, had never seen things for the very first time when we were doing it. So, but really it exploded in a way that we never anticipated, and kind of just the amount of community support and the stories we hear from people on the impact that the channel has made is just very humbling and just mind-boggling to think that we're part of something that has been so successful in the space. So thanks for all the support and for coming along the journey with us.
I mean, I remember you guys already last year at MMS, you were sharing some mind-blowing statistics from your show. How many subscribers do you have today?
We just crossed the 35,000 subscriber mark, and over 2 million views in the last 4 years. So yeah, it's quite.
I think the minutes viewed is actually the bigger one, which is, I think last time we calculated it was the equivalent of 35 years.
Yeah, about 35 years of viewed hours. Yeah.
Take a while. All right.
Yeah,
it's a lot of chats, a lot of talking around this stuff for sure.
Yeah,
too much talking.
it's kind of interesting because it gives an indication on how quickly Intune has been ramping up just the last few years, and we see the same thing on the academy here as well. The interest for config managed imaging is like, oh, it's like it's always has been, like steady, but Intune, everything sold out, every single class since we started with it, and it's just, I've never seen anything like that, and I've been doing this for a long time. Turned 50 last week, so getting old.
Happy birthday!
Thank you. But it's just it's an indication on how quickly organizations are at some point in that journey. I can't think of any of our customers that I work with that aren't somewhere on that scale. I mean, they did share some numbers at MMS on how many organizations that were still on config manager only, how were still using it in combination with Intune, but also organizations that were using Intune only. And it was just interesting to see the sheer number of organizations going that route or wanted to go that route. I always thought that config manager would be the platform they would try to leave behind and use Intune only. But in my experience, it's actually been, no, we would like just to leave legacy Active Directory first and get all the policies that are migrated over to Intune. Config manager will deal with later. But it's just, I'm not sure if that mimics what you guys are seeing as well, but I am surprised to learn that.
Yeah, we did a so Steve and I and Kent Augerland did a session at MMS talking about this, and we did a survey of the audience in advance, and I think we got about 40 respondents, and I would say that at least half are like what you described, where they are they have started. They've implemented some form of co-management and have started the transition into Intune, but still very much from a device provisioning perspective are still very much in the task sequence world. Not nearly as many folks have adopted Autopilot as have adopted, let's say, Intune policy configurations and things, or starting to do apps from Intune. So, people are starting down the path, but certainly I think it's a long journey for most folks. I mean, I'm very much in that camp as well. We're just in the middle of our migration to Azure AD only with Autopilot and Intune fully, but we're still using ConfigMgr on to help supplement some of the workloads, because we've got 1,500 applications that are in ConfigMgr, and that's going to take a while to rationalize and migrate over to Intune. So definitely seeing still the benefit of using ConfigMgr at least for another year in our environment before we can finally say, okay, I think we've exhausted its usefulness for what we need. But once again, there's no time, there's no clock on this. I think keep using the tools you have until as long as you need to, really. But I think a lot of the folks that we spoke with at MMS were very much in that same boat of just starting down the path, still very much just dipping their toe in the water, very much working on the organizational change. I think is probably the bigger piece of it. Is it's more than just Intune, as Kent said. It's a much bigger picture, and I think that's really catching a lot of folks. Is like, wow, we have to bring our whole IT org along with us.
Politics can certainly add some
yes,
interesting items to the mix.
Yeah.
So you guys just came home from Management Summit in Minneapolis, and we have like a standing point in these office hours there. We spend a few minutes talking about things that are new since last week usually, but since you're our guest, has there been something happening recently that you are excited about? And I'll have Adam go first.
Oh man, you caught me off guard on that one. I'm very let's see nope, you gotta go. Let Steve go first. It's gonna take me a minute. There's so many things.
All right, I'll go first. Look, I'm going to toe the company line and go Autopatch groups. If you haven't looked at it, make sure you go and definitely have a look at that. There's some really cool stuff that we've added around controls to make sure that you have the flexibility that you need to patch your computers while still having Microsoft come in and manage your updates and everything associated and get compliant and patched. From a purely selfish point of view, the other one that I'm really excited to hear and see is all of our announcements around the Mac OS stuff coming into Intune. I think that's just going to be fantastic. And I'm very much looking forward to that because it's something that I'm seeing as a big play of, well, it's great that you can do Windows, but how do you do everything else? Because in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, it's not just going to be, well, we're talking about Windows, we're talking about iOS or Android. It's we're managing your device or we're managing your data and how you get access to that on devices. So,
yeah. And these things aren't. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
Source. So the I guess these aren't necessarily new announcements, but they're things that are on my radar that I'm finally getting to start looking into. So one of the things is the frontline worker for Windows 365 SKU that is out in preview now, and so just trying to look into that and start leveraging that technology and seeing how that could fit into our overall stack. And then we were looking into the whole Azure AD lapse, or what is the official word? Windows lapse? What are we calling it? It's Windows lapse, right?
Windows lapse.
Windows lapse. So it's for Azure AD only devices. You can now leverage lapse, and it's integrated directly.
The important thing I'll call out there is also the variant that does it for Active Directory using the same technology. So they both exist. If you haven't made the transition across to AAD only, you can still use AD for that.
Yes, there you go. And so we've got I've got an intern starting next week, and that's going to be his project for the summer is migrating our existing devices from regular lapse, and then turning on lapse for all of our Windows 11 Azure AD only boxes. So very excited about those things. Certainly kind of digging into those spaces right now.
All right, awesome. What about you, Andre?
So it's funny, the first thing on my list was the link for what's new in Windows Autopatch May 2023, which actually was really cool. That did include the Autopatch groups. I believe now you can upgrade to Windows 11 with Autopatch. Is that correct, Steve?
Correct.
That was a big deal. I know a lot of people were talking about the lack of being able to do that with Autopatch, so that stuck out to me.
Would you like to share your screen there?
Yeah, absolutely. I can pop this up.
Coming up.
The other thing that's also popped out there as well that I'd probably get yelled at by a PM that we all know is reporting. We've improved our reporting considerably with the latest public preview, where you have the ability to actually see where you're having issues with your updates in your environment, what you can do to remediate that, troubleshoot it, and everything associated.
Yeah, and I noticed you can do some new filters on those reports as well, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
I saw a tweet from Danny just the other week here. He was asking the community for all right, what can we do more? What can Microsoft do better in reporting? And that was a good chunk of really good replies in that list. Not just the usual give us everything, but actually concrete, solid things that can be taken action on. So I haven't seen that thread out there. Recommend taking a look. Good stuff.
Yeah, and I was checking. They actually I don't know. They don't have a date set on this. I can't tell. They were doing a session called Straight Talk for where they were essentially going to do a session with the community. You could sign up to talk about some of the things around inventory and advanced app management that they were working through.
Very cool. Yeah, it seemed like there was quite a bit of feedback on that thread. That was a pretty good one. See if we can dig it up and add it to our links for the day.
Yeah, just put it in the private chat there.
Yeah.
For you.
Oh, awesome.
I want to bring up that thread, Andrew.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah, and so that's the one for signing up for the Straight Talk thing. But then there's the actual. Sorry, if you go back to Danny's profile, you'll be able to get to the. Scroll down just a little bit. Yeah, that one.
Yep. So I think, yeah, that's the original thread right there.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of good stuff here.
Yeah, we had Danny on, when was that? March? February? Something like that.
That sounds right.
Yeah. All right. What else, Andrew?
So we had those things. I did on the topic of Windows Labs. Nicholas Suter and Nicholas Tinner had a blog post about. Turned out MS Graph is storing the password history for Labs in Azure AD. So they wrote a blog post on how to basically retrieve that information, which I thought was pretty cool. So I've got just a couple of community tools here first before we get into the big topic of conversation over the last week. The IntuneManagement tool from Michael Carlson that we've talked about quite a bit here on Office Hours had a release on May 4th. Fantastic day, by the way. So I wanted to call that out.
I can't tell you how many times I've recommended that tool. That it's just great.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I've used it so much recently for comparing policies between each other to see what's different and talk about what's different and meetings and things like that. That's a sliver of what it can do, but man, what a useful tool. There's an updated high-level architecture diagram for Intune that I saw getting shared around quite a bit a couple of weeks ago. I think this was released also when we were at MMS. So good stuff here. And one other thing that I came across last week, I think, Jeff Scripter released a log parsing PowerShell module that I want to be checking out. So I wanted to call that out as well. But then the big topic of conversation this last week has been the Secure Boot CVE. If you haven't come across that yet, you've probably been very, very, very busy with other things if you haven't seen this at all. Basically, this update requires cumulative updates on endpoints. It requires boot media to be updated. So there's been a lot of conversation around this update, and I wanted to share a few of the links that I've found. A few of the links or a few of the conversations that I've found very useful so far that have been tracking this. I think I'm just scratching the surface with some of these, but they're ones that I've been following. Wanted to make sure that I get them out there so the rest of you can follow along as well. Brian Dam wrote a very nice blog post on the Patch Tuesday blog last week called What Systems Administrators Need to Know About These Patches. And this really helped me, when this was released, like a lot of other people were like, what do we do? What are we going to do here? I have no idea how we're going to fix this. And Brian's blog post here kind of helped ground me a little bit and talk through what the high level things are that we're going to need to do, what the impacts are. And I especially like this section, what should I do and when, where he kind of goes through it. So this is a great post. He's also got some references here. But then when you get down into the technical aspects of implementing this patch, there are three things that I've been paying attention to very closely. David Segura, who created and maintains the OSD Builder and OSD Cloud, good friend of ours. He has a Twitter thread that he's been trying to keep all of this information within one thread as we get updates over the last several days here, both updates to OSD Cloud, updates to OSD Builder, as well as updates from Microsoft. For example, I think yesterday, MSDN and VLSC saw the Windows 11 boot media updated, for example. And David's been trying to keep track of this within this thread. So this has been a pretty good reference for me over the last couple of days, as well as Gary Block has a solution in dealing with the endpoints, both updating and then the changes that you have to make on your endpoints here. He's also updated his solution that relies on either proactive remediations or configuration items, depending on if you want to go through Intune or Endpoint Analytics and or ConfigMgr. So this is going to be dealing with the endpoints, and then Jorgen Nilsson has a blog post that included a PowerShell script from one of his colleagues that is dealing with updating the boot images. So high level, there's an update.
Wow.
Your endpoints need
WPS.
changes. Your boot images need changes, and these things sort of should help you along with those changes.
It's funny that you mentioned it. I was just about to sign off from work yesterday, and I saw that little notification in Teams in the chat, like, all right, I'll see what it is. And it was 4 letters or 4 characters in that text. It was the word help, capital letters. And I saw the gentleman that posted it. It's like, oh, that's one of our customers in the UK. It's like close to midnight over there right now. I think I better answer this. And sure enough, he was trying to update the boot image with these changes and had made a non-optimal change to the boot image, essentially breaking his imaging. So we spent an hour and a half fixing up that boot image, added in what's needed to be done with it and drivers and whatnot. But it's one of those, all right, this is going to require a little bit of extra love from the admins in the upcoming weeks here. So great resources shared there, fantastic. Also, I know, Stephen, that you had a deadline, at least you did have a deadline coming up
I
real
still have
short.
a deadline.
All right.
I'm very sorry. And it looks like we've lost Adam. He appears to have some internet issues.
Yeah, I actually see him coming back now, so that is all good. But Stephen, I would like to thank you so much for joining, spending your time here with us for a little bit today, and see you again at some point in the future here.
We'll need to do it again. I just need to be better organized and book out my calendar earlier so I don't double book myself. I am really sorry, but it's been awesome. And I'll leave you in the capable hands of Adam when his internet's actually working.
I'm about to have to run back.
Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thank you, and talk soon. Bye.
Bye. All right. We actually have a few questions coming in. Maybe we can start with those because still have a whopping 31 minutes to go here.
Yep, that sounds good. So first question here is in Intune. I'll pull this up here in a moment. Basically, in this specific monitor view, I like this report, but this report has a column named device name. The device name is very confusing. Sometimes it comes with the actual Autopilot image PC name, or sometimes desktop dash something, or a very long device name. What is your opinion? So this is referring to, let me close some of these tabs here.
Not have too many tabs, really.
No, I agree.
Or browsers.
Yeah, you should see what my other browsers that I'm not presenting look like right now. All right, so devices, monitor, enrollment, and Autopilot deployments. So I actually don't have anything in there, interestingly. But this is the report that they're talking about. Do you happen to have anything in there, Johan?
I do not have access to that right now. I decided to
Okay.
go to Phoenix this morning, so I have stolen a conference room so I could join this one. I don't have access to my lab at the moment, unfortunately.
Okay.
But what I think it alludes to is that Autopilot by default has very, very limited naming capabilities of the devices as they are in the Autopilot device, and I'm assuming that shines through the reporting here that is mentioned. What you can do, if you don't mind a little bit of PowerShell, is that you can use your existing naming convention that you may use for everything else in your environment for imaging and whatnot, and through a graph and a healthy dose of PowerShell, you can actually assign whatever name you want to your Autopilot devices so that they don't have these strange names showing up. Intune devices you can always rename after the fact. That is certainly doable, both in the GUI but also through PowerShell. So that is an option. And Adam is back. Yay!
Holy smokes!
Welcome back.
I hope this sticks. Good Lord.
The irony is that Stephen in Australia somewhere has better internet connectivity than between us three in the United States. That's like, okay. Also have a friendly tip to you. Phoenix in the summertime is hot, in case you didn't know. I was told I was lucky, which was only 96 today. It was apparently 105 yesterday, so I'm glad I missed it yesterday.
Well, and when you left this morning, it was probably about 40, so a big difference.
Yeah, give or take. All right, so that was the naming for Autopilot. Let's see. There was a follow-up question from, must be 2 weeks ago, since we didn't have anything last week. That was the exact permissions needed to allow a wipe reset in Intune. I did not have a chance to look that up. It's been, I was actually on vacation last week.
Finally.
Finally, 1 week in a while. But Adam, if you are listening, do you happen to know what exact permissions are needed to do a wipe reset in Intune? If you want to like scope that down to a role, just on the top of your head.
Not off the top of my head, but there is a let's see, there's a doc that talks about the functionality. Normally the docs tell you the required RBAC, but I don't see it. I would assume that it's under, yeah, there you go.
Looks like that might be it. So under the remote tasks category.
Happen to have Zoom on your device?
Maybe.
So I did have some, I did recently actually go through this for trying to figure out the right permissions to allow Autopilot, but not the reset, actually.
Autopilot is fairly well documented what you need to grant. Nihaus have a post on it. I put together something when I did a cloud deployment session, but I haven't done anything for the wipe specifically.
Yeah,
but
that one was the labeling of the roles in here doesn't line up with what you would expect for the Autopilot functionality, which is frustrating. But yeah, that would be what I would go with here, the wipe.
Yeah, and then from there, just assign it to your scope tags here if you have custom scope tags, and then
it's interesting though, because it doesn't have a distinction between the different types of wipes or resets, it looks like. So that would be my only concern.
Yep.
To make it a little bit too much.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's as granular as you might want it to be. That would be my only thing there. Let's see if I can see.
Siva, who was asking the question, I'm afraid we don't have a solid answer for you there, but possibly start by testing out this wipe rule that exists, so that those permissions, and see if that gives you what you need. The ones that Andrew zoomed in on earlier or highlighted earlier.
Yeah, and then as far as the follow-up about assigning these roles to an AD group instead of an Azure AD group, I mean, really, if you're assigning these to an AD group that has been synced over through Azure AD Connect, it's really going to show up in this portal as an Azure AD group. So as long as the users exist in Azure AD, you should still be okay there.
All right, awesome. And then, of course, we got a comment coming in from Jeff here on LinkedIn mentioning it's not even summer in Phoenix yet. I know I've been in Phoenix in July also, and it's been a also warm experience. But yeah, I hear you loud and clear. Else have we coming in? There was a question regarding privileged identity management, PIM, for being a local device admin.
Ooh.
Technicians reporting that after activating the role, they are still not able to run as admin on a device.
Well, that is explicitly called out as unsupported in the docs.
And that was a quick and easy answer.
I will try to find the docs for it, but I literally ran across several blog posts or several posts about it recently, and that was the common answer was, yeah, this is explicitly called out as unsupported.
So they can still log on as admins, they just cannot run or do run as admin.
Yeah, so the issue is that there is so when you do PIM, you've got your PRT, your primary refresh token, that has to get the role before it activates, and the refresh cycle is like, I think 4 hours before you potentially would get the token. And so you can't do just in time with PIM for local administration functionality.
All right, excellent. Let's see what else. About assigning it, there was a question from Matt coming in. Any idea why ADR are starting to fail this month, or updates failing for Windows 11, specifically the May update? And that's something I see a little bit left and right, depending on which ConfigMgr version you happen to be on. If you're a little bit on two older versions, the new update format that Windows 11 now supports and uses, and May was the very first update that had that as a sort of a default patching mechanism. I have seen a good chunk of threads going on, organizations having troubles getting that to work correctly on the devices. For most part, upgrading to a later version of ConfigMgr solves the main problem, rather than trying to work with enabling Delta updates and whatnot for early versions of ConfigMgr. That is something that hurts my soul every time I hear about it, because it's not the first time Microsoft tries to do that particular stint of Delta files for updates, and they didn't succeed very well in the first time. And there seems to be a little bit of issues going on right now at the moment as well. So it can be many things, but I would start making sure I have a ConfigMgr version that is actually fully tested with these type of updates. Also, make sure you have enough disk space, because my site server were running low on disk because of these extra 10 gigs that are coming down to your distribution points as part of this update set. Not sure if you, Andrew or Adam, have stumbled across anything around the May updates for Windows 11.
I turned on WoofB a while back, and I haven't. I just haven't spent any time in dealing with ADR since then. It's been a wonderful life.
Yeah, same here. We haven't really seen any issues so far, but made sure to have enough disk space available before this last run.
You know, I'll tell you, just as we're on that, we found, just had no idea that this was the case. When we switched over from using ConfigMgr managed updates to WoofB, our patch compliance went up because I think we had some devices where, you know, either ConfigMgr or some policies or whatever were incorrectly configured, and devices just weren't getting updates, or patches were failing for different reasons. And we found that switching over to just using WoofB significantly helped with that. So if you've got the opportunity to look into that and to switch over, I highly recommend it.
I think you can shake hands with Andrew, because one of the organizations Andrew was helping recently, or still is helping, did the exact same thing, and the result was the same. As far as I remember, they're still using ConfigMgr, but for servers, but most of the clients are now being updated through WoofB rather than ConfigMgr. That drove up compliance levels.
Yep, that's right.
Kind of interesting. I mean, in all fairness, there are fewer settings to deal with when you use Intune as a management stack for Windows Update for Business, whereas there are like 1,200 different things and you can do in ConfigMgr, and approve updates and not approve updates, and it's more complicated.
And I will say, as a point of policy, that was also a move from many different technical areas setting their own policies or not setting their own policies or misconfiguring their update policies to consolidating into one update ring, essentially, after everybody agreed upon it. So I think that probably also helped as well.
Yeah.
So it's politics getting in the way again.
Well, and I think if you start going down this path of Windows Autopatch, especially if you haven't done WoofB yet, or let's say you've got well-defined, or maybe you don't, maybe you need help defining rings for your deployments, going down the Autopatch route significantly helps with that whole overall patch management process. They've added some new things to the feature set now where you can customize your targeting a little bit more. So that's pretty, I think that's going to help. The thing that I really like about it is that, we've got these release rings where we've got some defined sets of things, but then, which are based on maybe personas and things, but then we've got this other pile of like, I want a cross section across all my company of just, randomized set of 15% of our devices that I want in a bucket. And that's not necessarily straightforward. There's a whole bunch of different ways that people have done it. We used desktop analytics before for it, which was amazing. Then they took that away. But being able to have a tool with Autopatch to be able to help recreate those dynamic groups and stuff, I think is very beneficial. So if you're on the fence about going down the WoofB route, look at Autopatch. I think it'll greatly help you manage your updates.
Right, excellent. Let's see. There was a comment regarding laps. I'm not sure how that tied into the
discussion. Oh, he was saying the local admin in the using PIM for local admin. He was saying just use laps to do that instead.
Okay, I hear you. Yeah, that's definitely an option.
And Adam, you did find a couple of those links that you were referencing. You want me to go ahead and share those real quick?
Sure. Let me bring your screen back.
Yeah, one of them was a Reddit. So it was a Reddit post, and you can see Jason Sandys is the one emphatically declaring that it's called out.
Sure.
Yep.
And then another link on how that PRT is renewed.
Yeah.
So there's your 4 hours.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Fun fact, if you try to use custom Azure AD roles and then want to add those as groups to local or as local groups, as local group members, you can't. There is no SID for those that you can inject into the local admins groups or local groups in Windows. So you've got to use built-in roles or Azure AD groups, but you can't use a custom role.
It's like you tested out the hardware.
We had a really good plan, and it just fell flat.
All right. What else do we have? Also, follow-up comment on how to get the new update model working with ConfigMgr 2303. There isn't really much you have to do configuration-wise. It's more upgrading to that version of ConfigMgr, and it will support these new updates. Forgot which version that was the first one to support it. I like to say 2207, but don't hold me to that one. But this one definitely have it. But latest supported version is 2303. It's about a month old, month and a half old, and that one has full support for those type of updates. As usual, get a lab going, test it there first, then production.
2203 and above, it looks like.
Right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, what else? This is currently flighting to Windows 10 22H2. We are not actively deploying at the moment from ConfigMgr. What's the best log, event log? Basically see what is updating the client. So it's basically a story around devices that are upgrading themselves, even though they're not supposed to. There are known policies to these. I actually have seen a few reports of that lately. Some device, there was a issue going on. I think it was Frank that posted some of that on Twitter recently, but they had a few devices that were just upgrading quite quickly. And that turned out to be a bug that was fixed fairly quickly. But it can be so many things that forces a client to initiate an update.
I think one of the best options there is to tag Aria on Twitter at Aria Updated, and she generally will jump in and can point you in the right direction on those. I know there's been, or even just search where she's gotten tagged around updates, because there are several threads related to this where she talks through policies and settings to look for.
I've probably seen at least a dozen threads going on throughout the year, last 12 months, regarding this in one shape or form.
Mm-hmm.
I know you, Andrew, you worked with another customer, making sure their client policy settings were correct. And it turned out that not all clients had them.
Yeah, exactly. So something that you need to pay attention to, I mean, especially when you're going from WSUS or ConfigMgr updates over to WFB, making sure that you don't have any of the policies, overriding each other, or rather one that you would expect to override one of the policies isn't overriding them, overlapping policies. There's actually a report that I really like. And I'm sure we've probably mentioned this on here before, from Ben Whitmore and several of the folks over at MS Endpoint Manager, that will actually help you report on your Windows Update settings to make sure that they are configured properly in the way that you would expect. And this solution just basically takes a script that you can deploy with a proactive remediation, uploads this information to Log Analytics, and then we'll report that out. And we have seen this help us identify misconfigurations, overlapping configurations, and that sort of thing that could cause these types of issues.
It's basically extending the inventory, software inventory on the clients. And through this workbook that you download for free, you get pretty good details on how many machines that you have on a specific configuration. And then you may have to go and address that for those machines.
Yep.
There's also a newer update compliance report from Microsoft built on Azure Monitor that should help. Will at least give you a better picture of what's out there, what's being targeted. I'm posting it in the chat here for us as well. So, in conjunction with this, I think those two, having both of those enabled in your environment, I think will help you get a really good picture of what's going on. But then also just using the PowerShell script to get Windows Update log, potentially will tell you some things on those devices as well. But it's kind of it's very much still a black box on trying to find out what actually triggered the thing, why it actually came down.
Mm-hmm.
Just finding there is an FAQ that was published late March. I bring that link in the chat so Andrew can share it. That clarifies a little bit on the Unified Update platform and how they're changing in this case for WSUS, but I believe there is one for ConfigMgr as well, highlighting these changes.
Yeah, and Adam shared a link here as well. That'll make sure we get posted.
Oh yeah, so that one was to clarify. Looks like one of the comments was around the UUP in 2303. They were specifically trying to get Windows 11 updates in there, and that tech community post specifically talks about UUP and Windows 11. I've not gone this path, so I don't know, but this is the most current info about it we've got.
There's some pretty good Reddit threads as well, going through this.
Awesome. I've got these copied out. I'll make sure we get them posted in our links for the stream, Johan.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What else?
Got a question here surrounding drivers. Where have you guys gone with deploying drivers or driver updates for older devices, or where latest drivers are not available in Intune?
I mean, what we're using in production for pretty much all customers right now that needs to have updated drivers is pushing that out through ConfigMgr, because the Intune platform is not quite there yet in offer that capability. The foundation is there now in terms of policies and deployment service and whatnot, but all the normal user interfaces are not yet available. You can do a lot of work through PowerShell. There is a PowerShell module from David Brook that we have showcased many times in there, and these office hours. I talked about how to set it up on a sort of a total control method, the way you usually did drivers for MDT and ConfigMgr and others back in the days. So you can approve them on a per model basis whenever updates are available. But there is still a little bit of work to do, both from the OEMs as well as Microsoft, to get a little bit of richer targeting than they currently have. That there are a few things missing for this to be like, yeah, hit the go button, just do this everywhere. This is something that will unfold during this year, but the foundation is already in place and it works. If you play around with it and test it, it actually will happily install those drivers and firmware to devices. It won't configure them, but it will update them.
So, and I'll add to that, we're kind of doing a defense in depth type approach for this, where we've turned on drivers in Windows Update for Business and just said, just install what's available, instead of trying to use drivers and firmware, because it was available at this point. Word of caution though, you want to make sure you've got a really good base. You want to make sure your drivers are already pretty up to date, or else you're going to get a fun couple of weeks of devices getting all sorts of drivers and things initially. We ran into that, and we had some fun firmware issues and things like that, where it was an order of operations problem. So just proceed with caution if you light that up. But if you get that enabled and you're just having Windows updates come down, but you're finding that you just need some other drivers that aren't available through the platform. So we're a Lenovo shop primarily, and we're deploying Lenovo Commercial Vantage as a core app on all of our devices. But we've also ingested, using custom ADMX ingestion, and we've ingested the ADMX configuration policies for Commercial Vantage. So we're locking it down so that Vantage doesn't actually do auto updates, because we felt like it was stepping on and having a different user experience than getting drivers through Windows Update. And so we've left it there as a utility so that users or even local support can use that as a tool to go and get Lenovo updates if needed, so they can manually check for them and install the updates as needed, but they're not just going to come down automatically through the tool. And so that's how we're handling it. But depending on the platform you're on, depending, I don't know what all the different tool sets are available from the other manufacturers. I suspect most have similar things, but that's what we're doing.
I mean, some of the organizations we work with, they have now been mandated, basically. It's law. They have to, if there is a firmware issue, a CV attached to a firmware update, they actually must deploy them in a timely fashion. And currently, the way they do that is through ConfigMgr, but there is nothing that prevents you to create a similar application in Intune and just deploy it until these richer options become available through the normal firmware stack. But that's one of the information that is missing right now. The vendors are not publishing that information into the updates that goes out to the updates that Intune will see eventually, and that the new deployment service are seeing. They are only available on Defender for Endpoint for the few organizations that happen to have access to that. It's like different channels with information, and that needs to be aligned in, so we get that level of decision, because that will, if there is a no vulnerability for a given model or a few models, perfect. Then we put in some effort and focus on getting them patched quickly.
And even we ran into this one as well, where the vendor themselves have to flag particular updates as critical in order for them to actually come down as required updates. Otherwise, they just show as optional. And so you may find there's a firmware or something stuck in optional that you can't force down on your devices through Windows Update for Business because it's not critical, and then you have to work with the vendor to get that pushed through, and that's a fun journey as well. So there's definitely some trade-offs, and like you're saying, you've got to go with the mechanism that's going to meet your regulatory requirements for sure.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. There was one coming in from Joe regarding basically mentioning that desktop analytics obviously went away a few months back, and now we are using Endpoint Analytics, but no longer able to review application adoption, readiness, risk, or data for each OS build. How have you adapted for that? I haven't seen much of that being done lately, just because application compatibility between Windows 10 and Windows 11 has been really, really, really good in comparison to earlier years in Windows history.
I would agree with you 100% there. We heavily used, when we went from 7 to 10, we were using DA and all that kind of stuff, and it was it was useful. We definitely used it initially, but then we built this confidence level and we said, we don't even care anymore. And we just started letting feature updates come down regularly without any, just like any other Windows updates. We kind of just abandoned the whole like testing structure and everything around it because it just was, robust enough that it just worked. And so like we're, in the process of going from 10 to 11 now, and we're not seeing any application compatibility issues related to the OS. The compatibility issues we're seeing are related to AD versus Azure AD join and that sort of thing, where or legacy, some sort of legacy permissions things that just are incompatible with Azure AD versus things where it's not OS related, I guess. And so we've, even from the app perspective, I said earlier, we've got 1,500 apps, and we're not pre-testing the apps as we move to Windows 11. We're just assuming they're going to work and just prepared for break fix whenever the wheels fall off. So, I mean, depending on your environment, that may be something you can leverage. We certainly have some flexibility there in our environment where we're not so stringent that that's a big concern, that we have to test all of our apps before we can roll out a thing. And check your app testing process. Or when's the last time you actually caught a thing that was problematic? Are you just going through the motions to say you did? Where if you're not finding problems every single cycle, maybe you don't need to do it anymore. But that's just my thought.
Oh, but it's great, and that is pretty much what we're seeing as well. I shared a link in the private chat here. It's a workbook that our friends at MS Endpoint Manager put together regarding checking reliability that I think is kind of related to this. But this is making sure you don't have a lot of crashes, etc., in your environment, and you can extend inventory to report that up on Intune as well. But in general, I hadn't had any, as Adam mentioned, major issues with application compatibility testing the last 2 years. That was more in the past. Plus, Microsoft has been quite supportive in offering engineering help should there be a problem that you can tap into and use. I forgot what they called that program. It was one other fast track program. Yeah, Fast Assure.
Assure.
Assure. Something like that. But gentlemen, Adam, Andrew, thank you so much for joining today. And have to send something down to Australia to say thank you to Stephen as well. But thank you, and everyone else who's listening. Have a great rest of your week, and we hope to see you again next week. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody.